Video, go back, check out the previous video, which is the first one that I posted, which is a yoga sequence, and put together some of this information. Let's get started. Hands palm to palm, attention to breath. In through nose, out through nose. Taking a moment just to honor the self, sending gratitude to the self. Release hands. So that's number one. Yoga for beginners is the breath. It's the essence of the practice. The Ujjayi breath, breathing in through the nose and out through the nose, slightly closing the throat. You'll slow your breath. You'll almost hear it. And you want to try to keep that through the practice because it's what guides you, keeps you grounded, and brings about a sense of calm throughout the practice, puts you in that nice, natural, neutral state. From here, let's go into a tabletop position just to warm up a little bit. Hips are over knees, heads of arm bones are over wrists. Widen the knees as wide as the mat, big toes together. Reach back into a child's pose. Breathe in, breathe out. Downward facing dog or Adho Mukha Savasana. So we're going to lift our hips up, Adho Mukha Svanasana. One common thing in down dog to look out for are your feet lined up. So you want hip distance between your feet and make sure that your heels are behind your toes rather than heels in, looking like a bit of a triangle. You want your heels behind your toes. The other thing that's common in down dog is for people to be forward with the shoulders closer to the wrists. You want to pull back. Now down dog is an inversion. It's not an easy pose. So give yourself some grace here. You can also bend your knees, an option I don't see a lot of students take, but notice how my back can still be flat in this position rather than forward. My hips are back, so you can take a shorter stance if needed. Let's walk forward into Uttanasana. Rise up to standing. Palms touch. Exhale, arms down. I'm going to show a couple poses and the differences with the foot placement. Anytime you're doing a pose where you're facing the front or the back of the mat, let's just say the short end of the mat, you want hip distance between your feet. Some poses and some practitioners, some lineages have feet together, but for our culture, normally feet under the hips is the best way to go. You want your knees to face forward, your thighs to face forward. So although you might just be standing here, you feel like you're doing something. Your tailbone is down, the heart is lifted, there's space across the collarbones. Your muscles feel engaged just being here. So you want to watch that you're not kind of rolled in on the inside of your feet. This is a principle we call inner outer. So from the inside engage first, move to the outside. So they're both engaged, starting with the inner. If you lift the toes a little bit, you'll keep the big toe mound down. So often, just in this pose, I'll see students with their heels kind of toward one another. Less frequently, you'll see something like this. But if you do that for a moment, you can feel the strain on the outside of the knees. So you really want to practice with your feet parallel, heels behind toes. If you do have one of these tendencies, doing this is going to feel a little awkward and it'll take a little time to get used to. But that's part of the practice. Remember, the thighs are facing forward, knees facing forward instead of inward, tailbone down. So that's the start of having your pose be facing the short edge of a mat. Let's do a standing lunge. Put hands on hips. Step the right leg back. So here you still have that hip distance. If you were to put your right leg right behind your left foot, it would feel a little weird. And then your hips, they just don't have the space to be safe. We want to be able to practice yoga for a long time and protect our hips. So hip distance. Also, check the foot on the front leg. Is the heel behind the toes? Are the toes facing forward rather than inward? That's another thing common I'll see is the foot turning inward, which puts a lot of strain on the knee. We do it for protection. Normally, we go inward for protection, but we want to have the toes facing forward, the left hip back, so you're not leading with the left hip. It's back, so you feel like a straight line across your hips. The next thing is the knee. You don't want the knee to go over the ankle like that, because then the pose is all about the knee, and yoga is holistic, using everything. So the knee is above the ankle or behind. Notice the difference with that. The knee is an assistant. It's not a leader, so it assists us in our poses. Then, step forward. Arms up overhead, tailbone down. Toes can lift a bit. Feel the strength in the legs. Exhale, arms down. Now this isn't going to be so much of a sequence, more kind of pointing things out. Remember, you can go back, watch the video before this for a bit more of a sequence and the videos to come. So for here, we're going to take the right leg behind the left leg, facing a long edge of our mat. When we face a long edge of our mat, now this is general most of the time, it's heel behind heel. We're not doing the hip distance. So here we have heel behind heel. Sometimes you'll challenge your balance. The front foot is still facing forward with not the foot turned in. You can lift the toes a bit so that you're planting the sole of the foot on the floor instead of clenching your toes. Another thing sometimes I'll see, and then you kind of suck up the arch. You want to expand out. That energy goes from foot up to hip crease, rather than hip crease down to foot. Now the back leg, the foot is at a 45-degree angle. Notice my heel is kicked out a little bit. Still engaged with the toes from inside of foot to outside to the back heel. That way you're moving from inner to outer. Your inner thigh is moving toward the outside back heel. So you have an opening. It's always an unfolding rather than coming in. We want that inward, but then we want it to move outward, away from the midline. And sometimes another common thing I'll see is the 45-degree angle be this way. It's just better for alignment to have it be this way, but then focus on that inner outer. If you're not focusing on that, your hip will turn inward, and it's not something we want. So you're engaging the inside of the back foot, the inner thigh, and feeling the energy move outward. It's almost like your hip just moves outward. So you have space across your hips. Good. So from this pose, Another common pose, let's just go with Parshvottanasana, side angle pose, where you bend the knee. Again, we wouldn't want it to go over the ankle. And this is enough if you're okay here, because you want to be powerful in every pose. If you want your front thigh to sink down lower to the mat, you bring back your back leg. Remember, you want to feel powerful in every pose. Same thing, the hip feels open. We're going to do Uttita, or extended, so the right arm comes up. Bring it down to your right leg so the shoulder is open. All the principles go together. So we're not closed and trying to lift the arm. It's open, comes up, overhead, palm down. Your left arm can rest on your left thigh. Right side of body is stacked over left. Notice how I can gaze over toward you, toward the right, rather than looking down. See how the body then goes downward, the back hip is drooping. So you want to get your right arm over the ear, press the left arm into the thigh to get a lift. For some, you'll go down to the floor, but some people do this when they're not ready, and again, they're going to be down rather than lifted upward. You can also use a block. If the floor is too far, the blocks, you can put them different sides for different heights, and maybe you're somewhere in between. But again, you want to feel root to rise, so from floor up, everything's lifted, and then from back foot, up the leg, out the fingertips. We would breathe here, still with our Ujjayi. Inhale, come up, because inhale, you're going to hug muscle to the bone for strength. Bring your legs together, hands palm to palm. Look down at your feet, see if they're lined up. Have gratitude with the self. Try these couple of tips. We'll just do a few at a time. So it's yoga for beginners, but a couple principles at a time. Try the video before this, or if you're doing your own sort of sequence, keep these tips in mind, and there will be more to come in the future. Drop any questions down in the comments below. Make sure to like the video, subscribe, become a part of the DrishTi community. Namaste, friends.